Annalisa sat at the long mahogany dining table in the heart of an opulent restaurant, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture as composed as her carefully constructed smile. The golden light of chandeliers shimmered across crystal glasses, and silver cutlery, catching in the corners of her eyes like tiny daggers. The atmosphere buzzed with the warmth of laughter and clinking glasses, and at the center of it all sat her in-laws, Lisbeth and Cornelius, beaming with exaggerated delight as they celebrated yet another grand family dinner. "Oh, dear daughter-in-law," Lisbeth trilled with a theatrical gasp, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "It seems we've forgotten our wallets again." Her chuckle rang out like a challenge rather than an apology. Cornelius, ever her echo, followed with his deep, mirthless laughter. The table joined in, their amusement bouncing off the walls in a chorus of entitlement. Moments later, the waiter discreetly presented the bill. Annalisa's stomach tightened. The number, 200,000 rubles, stared back at her with cold clarity. She didn't move. Not yet. She looked around at the table, at the relatives leaning in, waiting, expecting. Her husband Don avoided her gaze, as always. And suddenly, something inside Annalisa began to shift, not with rage, but with the aching weight of realization. She hadn't married Don just for love. No, what had drawn her to him was something deeper, almost desperate, a longing for the family she never had. Her childhood had been defined by chaos and emotional neglect. Her parents were like thunderclouds, always at odds, shouting over every small thing, forgetting that a child stood between them. Annalisa had craved warmth, a sense of safety, unity. Don had seemed like a gentle soul, someone who, despite his indecisiveness and naivety, might be shaped into the partner she needed, as she'd convinced herself that his constant deference to his mother was just a phase, that his calls to Lisbeth before making even minor choices were signs of respect, not dependence. She had wanted to believe that, in time, he would grow, but time only deepened the shadows. His mother's hold over him was suffocating, and Don had no desire to break free from it. He didn't need a wife, he needed a second mother. And Annalisa, carrying the quiet strength forged from her own painful upbringing, stepped into that role without realizing the cost. While Don's job as a mid-level manager paid a decent wage, his hobbies devoured his income. Fishing trips that required expensive new rods, hunting weekends that came with luxury lodges and custom gear, and an ever-growing collection of high-end electronics he barely used. Annalisa, meanwhile, was a financial director at a prestigious firm. Her salary was significant, her savings meticulous, her future secure, until she started pouring it into someone else's life. The gatherings had begun simply. A few dinners, birthdays, and small celebrations. But gradually, they evolved into extravagant spectacles. Anniversaries with live bands. Milestones no one cared about turned into catered events. Cousins, acquaintances, and people she didn't even know showed up. The venues grew fancier. The bills grew heavier. The pressure mounted. At first, she didn't complain. She told herself it was all part of becoming a member of the family. Lisbeth was quick with the compliments, syrupy sweet lines laced with manipulation. "You're so good with money, darling. Don can't handle these things like you. You're the smart one, you know." The flattery stung more than it soothed, because it came with expectations. She was the one with the money. Therefore, she was the one who should pay. And Don? He said nothing. "Worse," he agreed. "You earn more, Anna. It's not a big deal for you," he would say with a shrug, as if their marriage had come with a silent contract of financial servitude. Annalisa gave. She gave and gave and gave. She footed every bill, planned every party, bought designer handbags and sleek watches as gifts. She renovated Lisbeth and Cornelius's apartment, funded luxury vacations they had no right to take, and quietly replaced their outdated appliances with high-end ones. Her own wardrobe became outdated. Her dreams of a private getaway remained. Dreams. She skipped vacations with friends. She turned down invitations to indulge in self-care because every spare coin had already been spent for someone else. And still, it was never enough that Lisbeth's requests grew bolder. "My back is killing me," she moaned one day. "The doctor says I need a proper spa retreat. But pensions, you know? You'll understand, won't you?" And like a sleepwalker, Anissa handed over her credit card, dead inside. Her smile Mechanical.it wasn't about money anymore. It was about being used. And it wasn't just by Lisbeth. It was by Don too. He never said no. Never once told his parents to stop. Never acknowledged the sacrifice it cost his wife. And that's when the resentment began to grow, deep and bitter, curling around her heart like a vine made of iron. The words of her grandmother returned to her then. A fierce woman who had raised herself from nothing, who had looked Annalisa in the eye one day and said, "Don't let anyone ride on your back, my dear, or you'll spend your life on your knees." Annalisa had dismissed the advice at the time, imagining she could fix things with kindness, with effort. But now she understood. She had become a beast of burden, carrying a family that pretended to love her while draining her dry. And so, the decision was made. Quietly, deliberately, the next family celebration would be the last she'd attend under their rules, Lisbeth. And Cornelius's anniversary was approaching, and as always, Lisbeth had spared no expense, except with her own money. She selected the venue, a luxurious fine dining restaurant adorned with crystal chandeliers and velvet upholstery. She sent out the invitations. She planned a menu fit for royalty. And once again, everyone assumed Annalisa would pay for it all. But this time, Annalisa was ready. For days, she gathered every bank statement, every invoice, every receipt. She assembled them into a folder, her own private audit of a year of servitude. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. For them, and for herself. She would attend the anniversary celebration. She would smile. She would sit at that table. And then, she would finally speak. The anniversary dinner shimmered with opulence, a spectacle of wealth built on someone else's sacrifice. Crystal chandeliers bathed the guests in golden light, illuminating the ivory tablecloths, the glistening silverware, and the arrangements of fresh roses in tall glass vases. The scent of roasted duck and truffle risotto lingered in the air, mingling with the low hum of conversation and the delicate notes of a string quartet tucked into one corner of the room. Annalisa stepped into the restaurant like a guest at her own execution, composed, poised, but simmering with the slow burn of resolve. Her dress was elegant but understated, a deliberate choice. She had no desire to compete with Lisbeth's flamboyant designer gown or Cornelius's custom-tailored suit. This wasn't a performance. This was a reckoning. The room was already buzzing with relatives, colleagues, and longtime friends of the family. Annalisa noticed how the older guests deferred to Lisbeth, how the younger ones gossiped quietly, casting glances at Don and his wife. She recognized the same cycle she'd lived in for years. Empty pleasantries, veiled insults, fake gratitude. And all of it tied together by the money she had provided. The same money no one ever mentioned. Don was already seated at the head table when she arrived. He stood quickly, trying to appear attentive. His eyes darted to her face, searching for something, maybe reassurance, maybe a cue that everything would go as usual. Annalisa offered him a faint smile, not cruel, just unreadable. "Hi," he said, almost sheepishly. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied simply, then sat down beside him. The guests mingled, the music swelled, and the waitstaff began serving the meal course by course. Champagne flutes filled, salads placed with precision, gourmet entrees passed between hands. And with every toast, every bite, Annalisa felt the walls close in. She watched as Lisbeth held court, accepting compliments with faux humility. "Oh, we just love our little traditions," she would say, waving a manicured hand. "Family comes first, always." Don stood and offered a short speech, glowing with praise for his parents. "They've taught us so much about love, about commitment, about selflessness." The irony made Annalisa's teeth clench. Her hands curled around her napkin, white-knuckled, as if squeezing her restraint into the fabric. No one in that room knew what selflessness really meant, what it meant to quietly bleed for others, to shrink yourself so someone else could stretch. She barely touched her food as the dessert was served and the night inched toward its final act. The moment came. The waiter approached the head table discreetly, the check folder in hand. As if choreographed, he placed it in front of Lisbeth, who picked it up, glanced at it briefly, and then looked directly at Annalisa. "Oh dear," she said, her voice syrupy, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You'll handle this, won't you?" The room fell into a familiar hush. It was expected. It was routine. It was the role Annalisa had played for years without protest, but not tonight. Annalisa didn't move for her purse. Instead, she reached calmly for the gift envelope box, the one where all the guests had placed their contributions for the anniversary couple. She opened it, counted the money silently, then looked up. "There's 230,000 rubles in here," she said, her voice calm but deliberate. "That should cover the bill." Murmurs began immediately, low and confused. Before Lisbeth could respond, Annalisa pulled the folder from her bag and placed it squarely on the table. Thick, heavy, and labeled. She opened it slowly, her fingers steady. "And this," she said, her voice louder now, "is my real gift to you both." She flipped through the first few pages, copies of receipts, invoices, transfer records. The guests leaned in. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others exchanged looks. "This," she continued, "is everything I've spent on this family in the past year alone. Gifts, restaurant bills, trips, groceries, utility payments, home renovations, spa retreats, medical costs, furniture, you name it." Lisbeth's face turned a shade darker, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. Cornelius went still, his fork paused in midair. Don looked like the breath had been knocked from his chest. "The total," Annalisa said clearly, "comes to nearly 1 million rubles. Paid with my salary, my time, my effort. Not because I was asked, but because it was expected, because I was told I should, that I had more, that it wasn't a big deal." Silence followed, thick, unmoving. Someone coughed. A glass clinked. Annalisa wasn't finished. "I did it because I wanted to be part of this family. I wanted to belong. I wanted to believe in something better than what I came from. But no one ever asked what it cost me. No one ever wondered if I was happy or if I wanted any of this." Her gaze met Don's. "Not even you." Lisbeth's voice broke the silence. "How dare you?" she hissed, standing so fast her chair scraped the floor. "You ungrateful girl. You ruin our anniversary? In front of everyone." Annalisa stood as well, refusing to back down. "No, I'm not ruining anything. I'm telling the truth. Something none of you have ever respected." Lisbeth scoffed. "You're just jealous. You resent Don. You always have. You think you're better than us because you make more money." Annalisa's voice didn't waver. "I don't resent Don. I pity him. He never stood a chance with a mother who controls every decision and a father who never speaks up. And I'm not better because I earn more. I'm just tired of being used." She turned to Don, softer now. "I thought we were building a life together, but it turns out I was just paying for yours." Cornelius finally spoke, his voice low. "Lies, maybe she's right. Maybe it's time we stop relying on her." Lisbeth turned on him like a whip. "Oh, now you grow a spine? How convenient." Don reached for his mother's wrist when she moved toward Annalisa, his voice strained. "Mom, please. Stop." She yanked her hand away, eyes blazing. "This is your fault. You let her poison you." Annalisa shook her head, sad now, exhausted. "No, he's just finally hearing the truth. You didn't raise a weak son. You raised a dependent one." She turned to the room. "I'm done. Done being your bank, your fixer, your silent funder. I want to live for myself now." Then, without waiting for another word, Annalisa picked up her purse and walked away. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor. She didn't look back. Behind her, voices rose, some shocked, some angry, some stunned into silence. But Annalisa felt only clarity. She had done what needed to be done. The cold air hit Annalisa like a breath of rebirth as she stepped out of the restaurant and into the night. She didn't shiver. She didn't cry. Her heart thundered in her chest, not from fear or regret, but from the adrenaline of truth finally released. Behind her, the door clicked shut on a room full of stunned silence and stunned faces. Lisbeth's shrill voice echoed for a moment and then was gone. She was free. The city lights blinked at her like 1,000 new possibilities. For the first time in years, she wasn't walking home weighed down by guilt, expectation, silent, resentment. Every step away from that banquet hall felt lighter, more real. Her heels struck the pavement not with hesitation but with purpose. Her apartment, the modest but comforting space she'd bought before she married. Annalisa kicked off her shoes and dropped her purse. Her reflection caught her eye in the hallway mirror. Her dress, her lipstick, her tired eyes. But behind them, something else stirred. Power. Control. Freedom. She sat on the edge of her bed, still in full makeup, staring into the stillness. The silence was no longer empty. It was peace. Here, there were no voices pushing her into corners, no subtle digs about her responsibilities. Just her. And that was enough. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Her mind replayed everything: Dawn's stunned silence, Lisbeth's rage, the looks of confused discomfort from guests who had been more than happy to eat her food and sip her wine while never offering help. But underneath the mental noise was a growing calm, a sense that she had finally honored herself. The next morning, Annalisa woke with a clarity that had eluded her for years. She poured herself a coffee, sat at the table, and made a list. This time not for someone else, not for a party, not for an event. A list for herself. Speak to a divorce attorney. Request a leave of absence from work. Close all joint accounts. With Dawn, cancel any scheduled payments connected to his family. Begin again. She started immediately. Her lawyer was surprised by the speed of her decision, but respected it. No drama, she told him. No fighting. Just a clean break. I want my life back. When she called her office to request time off, her assistant hesitated. Are you okay? The young woman asked gently. I will be, Annalisa answered. And she meant it. The first few days were strange. The quiet was disorienting. She was used to being constantly occupied, organizing events, checking spreadsheets, managing finances for others. Now she had time. And with that time came waves of unexpected grief. Grief not for Dawn, or even for the marriage, but for the fantasy she had tried so hard to believe in. She cried once, really cried. Not over Lisbeth's cruelty or Dawn's passivity, but for the little girl inside her who had believed that marriage would fix the ache of her childhood. Who had thought that giving endlessly would eventually earn love in return. That family could be bought with loyalty. But that girl was gone now, replaced by a woman who finally understood her worth. Annalisa began to rebuild, not dramatically, not with grand gestures, but quietly, day by day. She took long walks. She enrolled in a yoga class, where she moved her body in ways that released years of tension. She began swimming again, rediscovering the calm she used to feel slicing through water lap after lap. She cooked for herself, not for a dinner party or to impress, but just because she wanted to. She called friends she hadn't seen in years, apologized for disappearing in a marriage, and was surprised by how many still welcomed her with warmth. You were never yourself with him, one friend said over drinks. I'm glad you're back. Back. The word echoed in her mind. She wasn't back. She was new, stronger, clearer. Financially, she moved fast. She cut off every lingering tie. She sat in her home office one afternoon, poring over statements, canceling cards, severing shared accounts. Each click, each confirmation email felt like shedding a skin. She opened a new investment portfolio, one just for her. No more hidden expenses. No more disappearing savings. Days turned to weeks. The anniversary scandal became a story whispered about in the family circles, but no one reached out. Not even Dawn. And that suited her just fine. Until, one night, her phone rang. The screen lit up with his name. She stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering over the answer button. Then she tapped it. Hello, she said, her voice neutral. Annalisa. Dawn's voice was low, unsure. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. She didn't speak, letting the silence stretch. I was blind, he continued. I let them take advantage of you. I let myself become a burden. I should have stood up for you. I should have. You should have seen me, she said softly. Seen what I was doing. What I was giving up. I know. I do now. There was pain in his voice, genuine this time. I started therapy. I moved out. Took a new job. It's hard. But I'm trying. She nodded, even though he couldn't see. That's good, Dawn. I hope you keep going. I miss you, he said. I miss us. Annalisa's chest tightened, not with longing, but with empathy. There had been good moments, real ones. But they weren't enough to erase the pain. I miss who we could have been, she answered. But not who we were. I don't think we can go back, Dawn. Too much was broken. Too much was ignored. He was silent for a long moment. Then, I understand. She didn't cry after the call. She didn't sink into sadness. She just breathed. It was closure, not the kind wrapped in reconciliation or romance, but in truth. And that was enough. Later that week, she passed by a bookstore and stopped. She used to love reading, and somewhere along the way she had stopped. She walked in, bought a novel, and spent the next 2 days curled on her couch, lost in pages that weren't hers. She cooked. She danced in her kitchen. She signed up for a language class. Life, real life, had begun. She wasn't lonely. She was alone. There was a difference. Cornelius never reached out directly, but she heard through a cousin that he had quietly admired her strength that night. "She did what I never had the courage to do," he'd reportedly said. That was enough for her to say yes. For Lisbeth, rumor had it she was furious. She blamed everyone but herself. Tried to manipulate Don into chasing Annalisa down, promising to change. But Don didn't budge. Maybe it was therapy. Maybe it was the undeniable truth that once spoken could never be taken back. Either way, the game was over. Months passed, but Annalisa did not measure time in days or dates anymore. She measured it in peace. In long mornings where she woke without dread. In evenings spent curled up with a book instead of a burden. In weekends free from orchestrated family gatherings that always felt more like performances than celebrations. She was free now, and freedom, she discovered, was not loud or flamboyant. It was quiet, gentle. It tasted like still coffee, like homemade soup, like music played just for her. Her apartment became her sanctuary. No longer a place she returned to between obligations, it became a home. She painted the walls soft earth tones, brought in plants that breathed life into every corner. Her bookshelves filled with poetry and finance, with mystery novels and philosophy, everything she had neglected while trying to impress a family that never truly saw her. Annalisa worked, but differently now. Her ambition remained, but it was no longer rooted in proving her worth. She turned down promotions that came with stress, but no satisfaction. Instead, she took on consulting projects that challenged her mind and freed her time. She mentored younger women in her field, offering the kind of support she wished she had been given years ago. Love, that was different now. At first, she thought she might never open herself again. The scars of her marriage were deep, not from violence, but from neglect, from the slow erosion of self that comes when you're only loved for what you can give. But healing changed her. She no longer craved validation. She no longer sought to be chosen. She simply lived, and in that living, she rediscovered joy. One day, during a gallery opening she attended with a friend, she met someone, Nathan. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't talk over her or try to impress her. He asked about her thoughts on the exhibit, and when she answered, he listened. He didn't ask what she did for a living until their second meeting, and when he found out, he didn't joke about being her sugar baby. He just said, "That sounds like something you're proud of," and left it at that. They didn't fall fast. They fell gently. No fireworks, just warmth. Long walks, shared meals, hours talking. He didn't need her to save him, and she didn't want someone to carry. They were two complete people, choosing to walk alongside each other. It was everything she had once dreamed love could be. But this time, it was real. Don reached out once more, a year after their last conversation. He wrote a letter, not asking to come back, but simply to thank her. He said he'd remained in therapy, that he had learned to live on his own, that he had started speaking up more, even disagreeing with his mother. He told her she had opened his eyes, that she had saved him, not as a wife, but as a mirror. Annalisa read the letter and smiled. Then she tucked it into a drawer and moved on. She didn't need to respond. Some goodbyes were meant to stay silent. Lisbeth, of course, never apologized. Rumors still made their way to Annalisa, how she resented losing control, how she blamed everyone but herself, how she complained that Don had become ungrateful. But none of that mattered anymore. Lisbeth's power had only existed because Annalisa once gave it to her. And now, that power was gone. Cornelius, she later heard, had started gardening. After decades of silence, he had found solace in dirt and seeds. Some cousins told her he had quietly separated his finances from Lisbeth's. He never spoke against her openly, but then, he didn't need to. He had made his own quiet rebellion. Annalisa, too, was blooming. She traveled, alone sometimes, with Nathan sometimes. She finally took the trip to Italy she had postponed 3 years earlier to pay for Lisbeth's healing spa retreat. She stood before Florence's Duomo, gelato in hand, and laughed, not from joy, but from something deeper. Relief. Wholeness. She wrote about her experience, not for vengeance, but for others who might be trapped in similar roles. Her essay, The Cost of Being the Good Wife, was published online and quickly went viral. Messages poured in. From women who said me too. From men who said I never realized. From daughters-in-law, sisters, and even mothers who admitted their own complicity. Annalisa replied to some. Others she just read, letting their stories wash over her like rain. She didn't need revenge. She had clarity. Years later, on a warm afternoon in late spring, Annalisa sat on a park bench beside Nathan, watching children fly kites. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. A little girl ran past, laughing, the way Annalisa once dreamed she might. She didn't know if motherhood was still in her future, and maybe it didn't have to be. She had mothered herself, nurtured her own broken places, and now she was whole. I never asked, Nathan said, glancing at her. If you could go back, would you change anything? Annalisa was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, not bitterly, but with peace. No, she said, because every wrong turn taught me how to find myself. I wouldn't be me without all of it. He kissed the back of her hand, and they sat in silence, the sun dipping low behind them. And somewhere, far away in a different city, in a different life, Lisbeth was likely telling someone a different version of the story, one where she was the victim, where Annalisa was cold and ungrateful. But that story didn't matter. Annalisa had written her own, and this time it was on her terms.